What's good, friendlies and non-friendlies, and welcome back. This is the beginning of the end. We've come a long way. It's gonna be a long video and a lot of strats. The first boss is the Super Virage. The second boss is Zieg. And the third boss is the final boss. We have no Angel's Prayers. We have no revives. We have to go through those 3 bosses. In order to make an accurate comparison across the American version and the Japan version, I'm going to need all of my party members to live through each fight. I guess we should start off with talking about the Super Virage. Like, he doesn't have any tricks like a lot of other bosses do in JP. Like, he doesn't take counter turns, I don't believe. So the way that you would handle him in North American Magic, just use the Psych Bomb. You know what the Psych Bomb reminds me of? If you ever played Speed Punks. Speed Punks was a PS1 old game, so like a Mario Kart racing type of game. You collect power-ups and stuff, and every once in a while, if you're like in last place, you'll collect like this swirly bubblegum swirl bomb thing, and it looks exactly like the Psych Bomb. And it's the sickest thing when you actually collect that. So anyways, back to the fight. That's how you beat him. You just use the Psych Bomb. You could beat him in 1 or 2 turns in the American version of the game. Now in JP, obviously, as stated before, item magic isn't that buff anymore, so you gotta handle it a little bit differently. You gotta use the fisticuffs. You gotta handle it with some elbow grease, and you gotta just knock him silly upside the head. So the 3 fights are going to be back to back to back. So this is the first boss fight, and there's going to be one right after this. There's going to be no point of recovery. I might like do a little guard defending, like random encounters in between here and there. We're going to try to get through this without taking too much losses, without using too much resources. You know, just try our best to endure. We have 3 healing items left. They're all 3 powerful heals. They heal us completely. And that's all I have to say about this one. And the next one, I don't really want to interrupt because it's like going to be like back to back. The next fight was a Zieg. Now this is a big topic here. Now I've been talking this whole time about how fights handle a little bit different. Sometimes it's not easy to see. You gotta feel it, you know, but hopefully I describe it, the difference well enough for you guys. This one is something that you can see, you can visualize, because he has a move that he doesn't do in the American game. Okay, there's 2 things that's different about him from a visual standpoint. He does explosion, which is something that he doesn't ever do in the American game. It's just a weaker version of the dragon, but the reason why it's so deadly, even though it's a weaker version of the dragon, is because it functions just like the dragon when he pulls the dragon out, which means it's not his actual turn. It's just like a set interval that allows him to get in extra damage. So that's why it's so deadly. It's because he seems to have more of these set intervals where he gets an extra turn to layer it on top of his other turns. So he'll do that quite often, but that's not all. Now, before we talk about that, I want to mention how the fight works. In the American game, it's pretty much straightforward. He just doesn't use explosion, and he only uses the dragon like once or twice in the fight. And the only way that he'll use a final burst is if you attack him with dart, which he'll retaliate after you do no damage to him with dart. Dart won't do damage on the first time. After that, he'll retaliate and do the final burst against dart. And more than likely, you're going to have the red armor on, which is going to make it do 0. You know, so that's it. That's just the end of that. So this is how it handles out in JP. Final burst is one of his set interval turns. Just like the explosion, just like the dragon, he'll take that extra set of turn and he'll do final burst. And he'll do it on anybody, not just dart, he'll do it on anybody. So that's the difference in this fight. He gets multiple set interval turns, or however you want to classify it, and he'll do explosion, which is a move he doesn't have, and then he'll do final burst, and he'll do it on multiple targets. Right, and obviously we have to mention the obvious, he hits harder, you know, and all this adds up and making him faster because he takes more turns to do those little set turns. I guess I should mention something, which is the reason why I even started doing this playthrough in the first place. Now, for as long as I've had internet, people weren't sure what the differences were in the Japanese game, and they weren't so sure what the difference were between the Japanese game and the American game. Now, people eventually learned the differences to a slight degree, but they didn't get the full story. They got the story that magic was nerfed in the Japanese game and that physical attacks were probably slightly better in the Japanese game. And so people took that and it was like, oh, I guess that could make some things harder in the Japanese game, but most enemies late game use magic, so I guess that really doesn't make it harder at all. In some cases the American game is harder, so I guess the American game is just naturally harder late game, especially because enemies late game use magic attacks and that's their main source of damaging you. So that seems to be what the mindset was and the differences between these two versions. At least that's how it was years ago. I don't know if people still think that way. Maybe a lot of people still do. I'm giving you this playthrough to tell you that that's all wrong. That's all hella wrong. That couldn't be the most furthest thing from the truth, because as I've been stating throughout this entire LP, item magic is nerfed for sure, but there's a difference between item magic and non-item magic. There's a difference, and that difference is shown to you in each and every one of these videos, and I preach about it over and over and over. Regular magic or non-item magic is actually more devastating in the Japanese game. So that comment or that thought that, well, the American game is harder because they use a lot of magic late game, and I guess that makes the Japanese game easier because, we don't have to deal with that extra magic damage. That mindset is false because enemies late game don't use item magic. They may throw it in every now and then, but they mostly and majorly use unique magic or unique spells, or spells that are dedicated to a certified class of individual, like Dragoon spells. Both count as magic, but they both operate differently. Hopefully that dispels or gives you an idea is completely false that the American game is harder in any way, of any shape or form. There is no way, shape, or form in any realm of any type or category at all. There's nothing that the American game has that is tougher or more difficult than the Japanese game. That item magic, that's one thing, but you also have to consider that having item magic being stronger, you figure you also get that benefit as well, which means you're also killing them faster. Now that you don't have item magic hurts you more than it hurts them, right? That's the main point here. Item magic hurts you because you don't have it. That's your source of magic, not theirs. So just take that away, and then now you have them with their own set of magic that hits way harder, and you have less ways of hurting them. That's all that the Japanese game is. So yeah, item magic is nerfed, but magic as a whole on the enemy side is buffed. Your magic isn't buffed at all. What it does is it separates the utilities. That Dragoon magic is significantly more valuable. That's all it does. But everything else, just enemies buffed, and that's not even talking about the technical side of the fights with the counterattacks and the speeds and the new moves and and the this and the that and the things that they took away. Just all around harder in every single way, shape, and form. There is under no circumstances any way possible that the American game is harder. That was a bit long-winded, but I can't state it enough. You're going to see that very clearly. If you haven't seen it up to this point, then I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say, man. What the hell is what are we doing? What are we doing? You know, like I'm undefeated right now in the American game. I have not lost once on the first try, at least. On the first try, first attempts, I am undefeated. I have not lost. I have lost on second attempts just for shits and giggles, just for the hell of it, and that was probably just like one time. So I won't say that I'm completely undefeated, but I will say on first attempts I'm undefeated in the American game, and I'm also doing a no item shop challenge in the American game. So we'll see if I can take that all the way through and finish the game without losing once. In Japanese, I've lost probably about 10 times, probably. I haven't been counting, I lost count. I'll leave you guys with that. Yeah, hopefully it's a good fight. I'll tell you one thing. He is way harder here. Way harder here. I mentioned in the last video that the Japanese game is kind of like Monster Hunter, where you like figure out how you take down a monster. Okay, now you spring the trap, you spring it all on that opponent all at once, and you figure out when's the time to strike. Okay, go. Take him down before he takes you down. That's not like that at all in the American game. And hopefully I demonstrate that. And it's a hard fight, hell of a hard fight, until you figure out how to fight him. So I'll bid you guys further ado, have a blast.